For thousands of years, the Jewish people have observed the Sabbath every week. On Friday nights, Jews around the world pause to dedicate a full day to reconnecting with God and one another. It's been said that more than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. Well, recently, an increasing number of Christians have also discovered the life-giving benefits of taking a 24-hour pause and celebrating the weekly Sabbath. Well, today, my guests, Michael and Selah Hirsch, will share their inspiring story about how practicing Shabbat has not only helped them resist our culture's push toward nonstop productivity, but the Sabbath has also transformed their family and their relationship with God as Christians. And to help more people discover the blessings of Shabbat, they wrote a book called Pressing Pause. Today, we're going to discuss their book, their story, and how Shabbat can help you live a more meaningful life. All right, Michael and Selah, hey, I am super excited to have this conversation with you guys today. Shabbat, the weekly Sabbath, is something that is really big here in the Lambert household. So I am really looking forward to talking to you about your new book, and we're going to have a great conversation because this is something that's near and dear to my heart and such an important topic. So good to see you today.
Oh, great to see you as well. Early Shabbat Shalom to you.
Right.
At the time of this recording. It's really an honor for Selah and I to be having this conversation with you and your incredible audience. And then early, as long as this goes well, a special thanks to our mutual friend and colleague, David Nakrutman from Biblical Activations and Isaiah Projects, who introduced us and got us together. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, no, David is a dear friend of yours and mine, and he's been on this podcast before, and he'll be on again. And it's just the power of relationships, as we've already discussed off camera. And so just grateful to have this time with you. So you guys have a new book. I've got it right here. How's it look right here?
I love it.
Hopefully it's looking good with all the screens.
No, it's also one of the things I appreciate. And of course, the content's the main thing, but it's really well just put together. And you guys just did a super job. We'll jump into that for a second. But even Michael and Selah, before we jump into our conversation, just want to frame it a little bit about the book and your story. And I think it's important just even to note that there is such a growing interest. You guys know this. I know this. I think a lot of people in our audience knows there's just a growing interest among Christians in particular when it comes to the Sabbath and Shabbat. Now, as we know, historically and in modern times, there have been and still are Christian groups that emphasize the observance of the Sabbath, even like institutionally. So we've got like Seventh-day Adventists. That's like part of the fabric of course, who they are, and they're well known for that. But I think something incredible is happening today. Christians really from various denominations are embracing just the beauty, and I like to say the secret of Shabbat. Although, of course, it's not a secret. It's been there all along. It certainly is not a secret to Israel and the Jewish people. But also, I think it's important to note that just, being sensitive to the times. Of course, Charlie Kirk recently, before his tragic death, he wrote a book on Shabbat. He was like into the Shabbat thing. I mean, I had people for the last couple of years tell me, man, Charlie Kirk is into this thing. He's going to write this book. And thankfully, before he passed, he wrote the book, and it's going to come out soon. So I think even when that comes out, there's going to be another spike in interest in Shabbat. So all that to say, I think you guys are on to something, and this is a timely conversation. So so I'm glad you could be with us today. So thanks for joining us.
Well, absolutely. And thank you for encouraging that we're onto something. We definitely want to be the first to acknowledge, and we'd be remiss to say that we're like the pioneers here of Shabbat and of Sabbath, what God started as a day of rest back in the garden. Some will even say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but we know for sure Moses to Nehemiah to Ezekiel, Jesus, the Lord of the Sabbath himself, the Apostle Paul, and many other prolific authors have written on the subject. And so we're excited to be able to join in on the conversation. What we imagine as a movement. You mentioned the tragedy involving Charlie Kirk, and I couldn't have imagined writing the script this way.
I know.
But that God is going to use what was meant for evil, that he is going to use for good in so many ways. And I believe in particular, in regard to the work that he penned on Sabbath, is going to not only just amplify, but it's going to accelerate what we're seeing, and is the common denominator, among Christians. And it's this topic of Sabbath, and we're finding it more and more. So we're just excited to play a part and make a contribution.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I appreciate all of that, and one of the things I really loved about your book is that it's a story. It's y'all's story. Of course, you are advocating and encouraging and trying to help people to see the beauty and the value of Shabbat in a very practical way, but you also kind of weave in a very personal way just how it's impacted you as a family. So I want to start with that a little bit here today in our conversation, and maybe even start with what we could call like your pre-Sabbath days, right? And so in the book, you start out talking about, you have a chapter dedicated to what you call warning lights. Now that was really very vivid and simple and clear. And you talk about how these warning lights were going off in your family, but not just your family. A lot of families and individuals struggle with what I thought you summed it up really well. You used the term soul exhaustion. So what did it look like for your family, maybe before you started practicing Shabbat? And why are so many families struggling with this sense of just exhaustion?
Yeah. I'll jump in. Let me share on this a little bit. I think it's great that we look at our lives because it's helpful to see that this conversation is so applicable to so many people who are listening in right now and not thinking, oh, maybe this isn't just for me, or maybe it's when I get a chance to get away and have that retreat time or something special, but it's for the now. And Michael and I, we say that this is a message that God has put in our heart for anyone who feels like they fall in the category of leaders, achievers, families. Yeah. I think pretty much everyone on some level can say that. And we're both very strong entrepreneurs and very strong community builders and leaders. And so our lives looked like a lot of running and gunning is like how I like to say it. And I joke around with a lot of people and I say, we're coming at you passionate and highly caffeinated. But let me tell you, I think in hindsight, all that caffeine and all that ambition and all that heart to do good in our communities, to run nonprofit organizations, to lead my agency, to make sure we don't lose one of the 4 kids that we have that are running around, or anything like that, was all done in a good heart, Ryan. It was all done, for, with Christ at the center point of our lives, and for us to keep our marriage in a strong place, and always asking the Lord, lead us and guide us, into places of purpose. So all of that was there, but you hinted to it a second ago because you called it like the secret. And I would say it was this giant missing piece. But connecting it for a moment to the warning lights is, we were just going 24/7. I feel like, over the years, we've been married nearly 20 years now. We've gotten pretty good at, you got this and I got this, and I'm speaking it to this group here, and you're going to lead this here. And did you remember the kids thing here? And just going. And in a way, we found our significance in that place. I know I did, and I can find my significance wrapped up in what I can achieve and what I can do, and crossing things off this to-do list. And all of that was burying what was really at the soul level, which was really, really close, if not in a place of burnout, and in probably what were these warning lights that were going off. I joke around sometimes when I've talked with other women, I was like, oh, they look like Christmas lights. No, those were red lights going off in your life. You just didn't see it that way, because it looked like doing more and achieving more and giving more. And really at the end of the day, the Lord is like, yes, I've called you to purpose, but not out of a place of striving. And, that striving was gotta go. And I'll tell you, that does relate to numbness. Those who are high achievers know what it's like to operate at high capacity and crash really hard, or we realize, hold on, we haven't really connected in a while. We're just kind of 2 ships passing in the night. Or I know that I can relate in ways where my relationship with the Lord was getting so rushed at times and kind of mechanical in ways. Even though my heart was all after Jesus, I was realizing my schedule was was coming first, and it wasn't really allowing the richness of sitting in his presence. And so our lives were full of fast-paced, relentless go mode, but they really needed to walk in a place of pace with the Lord, and through that, the overflow of his goodness. And that is where we found the balancing of going after endless and relentless pursuit to walking in pace with the Lord by operating in rhythms of Sabbath rest.
Oh, I love it. Gosh, that's so good. Michael, how about you? Talk to me a little bit about these warning lights, because I think and again, I think, Selah, so much of what you said, even if they're not, on that, the Enneagram, I'm a 3 also. I mean, I know you are. Say, I didn't even have to ask. I know you're a 3, and
you can see it coming.
Just achievers, right? Always going, always. But even for people that may not be on that, I think that so many people can relate to just our culture. And I like how you put it in the book. It's like our culture rewards the rat race, right? In a sense, it's like, people think, their value is found in just doing more, doing always, almost like being exhausted. And it's not healthy. And it's really not, as you really make the case in your book and in your story, it's not God's design. Mm-mm. So Michael, talk a little bit about pre-Shabbat, pre-Sabbath life. And then we're going to kind of take it from there and kind of how things changed.
So we're continuing to pull back the curtain
here. Yeah.
So for me, really it's, and I've been pondering this recently, it was thinking back to that period of time, and it was running a race. It was running at a pace without even realizing, of what I was missing. And so, Selah touched on, one of the warning signs. And for me, there was a fatigue, but my Enneagram, 8 would still like pull up my bootstraps and, just do what needs to get done, because in the name of God, in the name of Jesus, we have kingdom work to do, which is all great, but at the same time, have I forgotten my first love? Sure. And so, between experiencing some fatigue and even fogness, pulling into the driveway after picking up the kids and thinking about, wait a minute, what do I have to actually do next, and to check those boxes? That was the place that, I personally found myself at, as a husband, as a father, and a leader. And we're called to finish the race, to hear God say, well done, my good and faithful servant. And so the pace wasn't sustainable. And
the priorities were out of order.
It just
our priorities were out of order. We looked at our time as, why work 40 hours a week when you can work 60 hours a week and get more done, when really it's like, I need to work in different places, out of priority and relationship. I know that. I'll just say this last piece now. There's so much more to come, but I'll tell you, the practice of Sabbath rhythms has absolutely radically revolutionized the culture of our family, this context of our marriage. The time we spend together has been so enriched. And I think that is the before and after picture of where it used to be placed to the value that it is now, and the richness that comes when you're able to reorder those priorities within God's priorities.
That's good.
Yeah. And one of the things I appreciated about the book as well is you guys are honest about that. You talk about, you're sharing your story, you're promoting an idea, you're promoting this idea of, as Christians, the importance and the value of celebrating Shabbat, but you're also honest just about your struggles and about the reality. So I think that's important, because it makes it, I think, very relatable to with what a lot of people are struggling with. So, all right. So the warning lights were flashing for you guys and for your family. And I guess it's not a spoiler to say that Shabbat played a big part in really helping you to find relief and refuge, which I know you're going to share much more about here in a few minutes. But I thought, again, back to just this, your story. I think it's really neat how you some of the steps you shared, and you said in the book that your story included, to use your wording, divine breadcrumbs, which I thought was great. It's as if God was leading you, along the way. And one of those big breadcrumbs was Michael took a trip to Israel. And so I want to talk about that. I want to get both of your perspectives on this, because that was really a watershed moment for you guys regarding, let's just say, for your family and for your Sabbath journey. So Michael, I want to hear about this trip to the Holy Land, and you experienced a Shabbat there, and it was revolutionary for you, and how that impacted you. And then Selah, I want to hear your response too, to when Michael came back, because Michael he went by himself for that trip. But I really I smiled and I laughed when you wrote in the book that, and I wrote it down here in my notes, that Michael returned from Israel like Moses from the mountain, with this detailed plan and note cards about how you guys were going to do Sabbath. You were going to do Shabbat because of what he had experienced there with an authentic Jewish, Sabbath, and how that might help your family. So, okay, all that. Talk to us about this Israel trip. Michael, why don't you start, and the impact that what you experienced in Israel, how that impacted you. And then Selah, I want to hear your response too.
Absolutely. We'll get to the 3 simple words in just a minute. But Ryan, never forget, just on the plane, flying into Tel Aviv, spending some time, like most of us did. There were 25 of us that went on this trip, and looking over the itinerary. And, it was as if I had a knowing, looking at each day where I was going to have this encounter and this meeting and this revelatory moment with God and with the Lord. And I went from day to day. And each day, of course, something stood out to me, whether it was, being, on a boat in the Sea of Galilee or praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. But I seemed to skip over Friday, which was going to be our Shabbat dinner. And it's not because I had anything against it, but it kind of goes back, Ryan, to what you said earlier, just about it being almost like this secret. And so I'll never forget, and there are going to be 2 parts to this, but we arrive into Jerusalem on Friday afternoon. We check into our hotel, and then we get ready for the evening, which I knew was going to be a Shabbat dinner. Wasn't sure what we were going to do, but that was part of it. But we stood out in front of the hotel for just a few minutes. And it was as if I was hearing about Shabbat and Sabbath for the very first time. Not that I hadn't read in the 10 Commandments that Sabbath was there, but my eyes were open to it. Made God's top 4 and longest commandment. To hear just in a new way, in a fresh way. And maybe it's because I was just there and I had my shoes, on the ground, but hearing about, it was the Jews who kept Shabbat, but it was Shabbat that kept the Jews. And so in that moment, getting a chance to hear, which was important, then walking over and spending some time at the Wailing Wall and just hearing just people crying out to God in such a way to be like approaching a filled up soccer stadium of 100,000 people, but hearing just that fervency for God. And then we made our way over to a house. And it wasn't a big house, but it somehow fit all, again, including the family, and leaders, 30 plus of us in there. And it was almost like I experienced, Ryan, Abraham Heschel. You talked about, either, the cathedral in time or a palace in time. Where I got a chance to touch eternity, which, the few hours seemed like just mere minutes.
Yeah, that's good. Describe that.
And it was just in one of the moments I had a chance to experience this. And now this has become part, which we'll get into in a few minutes, just about what do this kind of the features of our Shabbat look like. But when we were all sitting at the table, and this is the middle of our dinner, and the husband, he stood up and he walked over just after singing Proverbs 31, which I don't do. You don't want to hear me sing Proverbs 31.
All right.
But he walks over to his wife and puts his hand, on her shoulder and just looks in her eyes and begins to speak a blessing over her. And I'm just like welling up right now, even just taking myself back into that moment. Yeah. And then walking over to each of his 5 kids and speaking blessing over them. And so I knew in that moment I had checked boxes on where I was going to meet and encounter God. And I'm sure that God will continue to reveal and unpack the Israel experience that I had a few years ago. But there was a knowing that sacred moment that I had the opportunity to experience was going to be something that I was going to bring back to Oklahoma. And I shared that with Selah from the airport. And she said the famous 3 words. She said, Michael, that's great. Just keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Yeah.
We all know our spouses. I know Michael's fervor and passion for God and Ironman races and doing big things in life and adventures. And he's downloading and telling me all these things. And all I'm thinking at the time is, okay, this sounds good, but what, how, where, when, like, we're, our lives are already so full. I feel like I can barely keep up. I'm falling into bed, like exhausted every night with like a mile-long to-do list the next day. Like, this sounds like more, because I hadn't experienced it yet. And I will say this, if you're at this point in the podcast, you have to experience the table. You have to experience the Shabbat. There's only so much we can say in this conversation today. There's something about putting your feet under the table. And I will warn you that we did not keep it simple at first. That is part of our hilarious story. Michael had all these, exciting things to share. And our first Shabbat, we laughed. It was a beautiful disaster. And the disaster part was in the sense as we were all starving and not sure what we were doing and trying to, follow a rhythm that was foreign in the moment. And if you have small kids, that look of like, what is happening, Mom? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't get this just yet. But the beautiful part is that we had encountered the presence of God in a way that we hadn't yet before. It was like only seeing, with one eye, or out of one lens your whole life, and then realizing there's more to it, going from 1-dimensional to 3-dimensional. And that was the beautiful piece of it. And we realized in hindsight, those breadcrumbs that the Lord was dropping for us was, let me show you another layer to the relationship that I laid out for you from the beginning of time. Let me give you greater revelation. You think you're walking in fullness, but I have so much more for you, my children. Yeah. And that has been the beautiful piece that we've discovered, that it was right there in the beginning of time. And it wasn't meant to stay there in a place of reading. It was meant to be experienced and encountered by the Father.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's beautiful. And Michael, you referenced Heschel, Abraham Joshua Heschel, just a few minutes ago. And I love his book, The Sabbath, and he talks about it being just a sanctuary of time. And of course we know, it's not like Sabbath, Shabbat is the only place and time you can access, intimacy with God, but there's something special about it. There's something, that's built in that is really, really powerful. So I think that's really, I think the way you articulate it in the book and just even right here is really powerful. And so I love that. So quick question. So how soon after you came back from Israel did you guys just say, all right, we're going to just give this a shot?
Oh,
first Friday.
48 hours. 48 hours.
I was still in jet lag mode on Wednesday.
Yeah?
We had packages arriving at the front door, menorahs and candles, everything. And we were getting things ready for that first Sabbath dinner on Friday night. We picked Friday night. That happened to be a day that worked we felt would work for our family and continues to work for our family to this day. So that's the rhythm that we've built in. But yes, that first Friday, and at that time, 3 small kiddos looking across the table at Mom, at each other, and thinking to themselves, what happened to Dad?
Yeah. Oh,
but man. You just have to start sometimes. You just have to start. Yeah. You just have to start with what you have and what you know, and meet the Lord in that place. I think that is our heart, is that there's no right way or perfect way or specific day or certain way, even though we do believe that there's a rhythm to follow that surrenders our humanity into a place where we cross the threshold into eternity. But that's the conversation we just started. And then I will tell you, the second one was actually the hardest. It wasn't the first one, because it was the resistance of the hard wiring of our nature to not want to stop again. So that's why we do tell people, expect the resistance, come back to the table. And I'll tell you, I am so grateful that Michael was like, we've got to try this again. We've got to come back again. And, and as much as I was in partnership with you, it wasn't a rhythm yet. Rhythms have to be built and developed and cultivated. And just don't expect it to be natural. I think that's the part that I only maybe wished I would have understood sooner, because we've learned that it goes against our nature as a culture. It goes against our nature and maybe our wiring of our productivity and our success, or how we already order our pace and our schedule. And it's all a reordering and a coming back to the Father.
It's so many things of what when I read your book and even talking to you now, it resonated with aspects of even my own story. Now, I grew up in a Reformed Jewish home, and Shabbat didn't become part of my weekly rhythm like it is now until I was an adult. But, so I can relate to what you're saying, and that I had to learn, even though I'm Jewish, and it was part of my heritage and part of, we were synagogue members, and I, had a bar mitzvah and all that good stuff. And, but still, we didn't really do Shabbat. I mean, we were not a religious Jewish family. So, Friday nights were going out to dinner, coming home. And when we were little, it was watching the Dukes of Hazzard. And then when I got older, it was watching Dallas,
Yes.
That was Shabbat, but it wasn't Shabbat, obviously.
Gotcha.
So, I had to learn it too. And but it's just, I think one of the things I like about your emphasis, your story, is that it's not all or nothing. It's not all at once. And a little bit is better than nothing. And so I think that is encouraging. And we're going to talk a little bit as we kind of proceed in the conversation, just even about some steps just to get started. And you guys even have a website. I love the name of it. It's so simple. startsabbath.com. I mean, that's, it's just taking that first step. But okay, we'll get into that here in just a little bit. So, but we'll talk about some practical stuff and what it looks like for you, what it can look like for other Christians in particular who are like, hey, I want to tap into this. But before we do that, I want to talk about my favorite chapter in the book. Okay. So again, the name of the book is Pressing Pause. And my favorite chapter was chapter 3. I read it cover to cover, but that was my favorite. In this chapter, I loved how you described Shabbat as an anchor and as a lighthouse for your family. And I think it was probably just something it just resonated with me very deeply, but I think it's something that, everybody's looking for some kind of anchor and lighthouse. But along this line, I want to read a quote from page 46 of the book. You wrote, "What became clear was Sabbath isn't reserved for perfect circumstances or emotional stability. It's a sacred refuge, especially necessary in our most broken, confused, and painful seasons." I thought that was really beautifully and powerfully stated. So I'd love for you just to share with us just a little bit, just personally, what you mean when you talk about Sabbath as a sacred refuge. That's really powerful and vivid. What does that look like for you guys as a family?
We're not too far removed from 2020, when everyone in the world kind of went through this shock and awe, and we didn't see it coming. And so I think we can all relate to, whether it's, at a national, global level or in a personal level, that feeling of walking through something we never saw coming, or something that has really shaken us to our core. And that's a big part of our story, because when Michael came back from Israel, and yes, within hours, we were quote unquote, starting, we sat at the table and we had our first Shabbat, and we pushed through and did it again and did it again and did it again. Little did we know we were less than 60 days away from one of the biggest storms that hit our lives personally. In our nearly 20 years of marriage, I look back and I see that year as probably our greatest, most expansive, challenging season of life, of leadership, of marriage, of parenting, of personal and depression levels, and it was literally nothing we saw coming. And so here we are, just hit over the head all of a sudden, 60 days later with a crisis that literally erupted out of the blue. And when I say, we had found our identity a lot of times in our work, that is where it started. It started in work. And then instantly we were asking the questions of what is going on and what is wrong and how do we fix this? And we were scrambling. And as soon as we were, and kind of even still reeling from that, not even maybe 6 weeks later, another massive storm hit. And that one, where it started more in your work and some of our crisis of leadership came into my life on a personal level. And instantaneously, for the first time in my entire life, I fell into an instantaneous place of anxiety and depression.
Wow. Sure.
And for Michael, you knew you were getting a redhead when you married me. And I'm like, I'm used to going and nonstop and a lot of positivity. And so for you to instantly see me wrecked on a level where all of a sudden I had lost a huge sense of my North Star of how do I walk through this scenario and how do I process this? And this is not me. And where is grief and trauma all of a sudden, at its highest surge? We were both at that point shaking. We talk about building an unshakable foundation in Christ. Well, that's the humanity. You were shaking. I was shaking. And then that just cascaded into a number of other scenarios and situations. And I will tell you, I will summarize it like this. First of all, it has given us a huge open eye and open heart of compassion for the battles that people are walking through that so many of us never know, and I truly believe that all those who knew us intimately knew we needed prayer, we needed support, we needed direction, and we needed guidance in that season of time. But for so many who didn't know us, they didn't know we were walking through that. And so I feel like we've all realized that there is a place that people are all walking through these unseen battles. But here's the part where Shabbat held us as this anchor.
Yeah.
It was twofold. It was physical and it was also in the spiritual realm. And I will tell you, at the physical place, we needed somewhere to land every Friday. And I will tell you, that year, I cried more tears than I have probably ever cried. I mean, I came in brokenness. I came with nothing in my hands, and the table became the safe place where even in moments where our marriage was challenged, we were trying to navigate decisions and a lot of constructs that were breaking, when Michael would put his hand on me. And I'm sure it took everything in you to bless in that moment. You know what I mean? Like, that's real life. That's real marriage right there, for our kids to kind of understand something is happening. Things are changing. Mom and dad, are walking through, emotions that we don't typically see. But say, this is where we come. This is our safe place. This is where we bring our brokenness, where we bring our messiness, where we bring our questions, because this is where Jesus is, in this moment of time. And then the spiritual piece is saying, Lord, meet me here. Meet me here when everything doesn't look beautiful and everything doesn't sound right. And I'm not walking through maybe a place of, revelation in the word. I'm coming at you simply with open hands and a broken heart saying, Father God, I need your presence in my life, and that's where it was the anchor for us. It was the place we showed up every Friday night. We gathered as a family. We took a big breath and we released our heaviness. And I'll tell you, I can tell you that table time in that season absolutely has marked our lives and our leadership and our marriage, because it's what held us through that season.
So powerful. Yeah. I mean, it's, I think what this emphasis upon, the great thing is that Shabbat comes every week, right? And so it's like, when I love the term anchor and lighthouse, because it's just like, there's going to be this point where you are going to be able to press pause and, connect with God, connect with each other. And there's, because we need that. And especially during difficult and challenging times. So I think that is just, I'm really glad that you emphasized that. And I thought the way that you communicated in the book was really beautiful.
Makes me think of, you just mentioned that, Ryan, makes me think of, and I gleaned this from David's book, Sabbath Invitation. And we began to then make this turn. These were unexpected storms that came our way. But really, Sabbath gave us the opportunity to really reestablish our foundation, who we are in God, who we are in Christ. Yeah. And as we then made this turn in the middle of the storm, we began to become Shabbat anticipators.
Yeah.
The best example I guess I can think of that I've experienced before that has to do with biking. So Selah mentioned I do Ironman triathlon races. And I remember when I first got started, not biking. I learned how to bike when I was a child, but when I first got into real cycling and biking longer distances, we lived in Oklahoma at the time. And I remember that I would be, before I'd go out for a bike ride, I would check the Weather Channel to see how hard the wind was blowing and from which direction. So I could plan my route so I could experience the least amount of resistance as possible.
That's good.
You were hardcore, man. Yeah.
But as you begin, like in life, like anything else, but as you begin to, build the stamina and the endurance, I remember finding myself, it took a few years to get there, but I stopped checking the Weather Channel app, and it didn't matter if I had a headwind or a tailwind.
That's good.
But it was just game on. And that was the special turn that we began to experience, not just in a week, but as you mentioned, we just kept coming to the table week after week after week. And that became our anchor and our sacred refuge.
Yeah, it's again, all these images we're drawing: lighthouse, refuge, anchor. It's not just lip service. It's real, because it's like, we just know it's going to be there for us, because we need that break, need that time to connect. And Shabbat does that in such a powerful way. If you're enjoying this conversation, I want you to know that the Bridge Builders Forum is more than just a podcast. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Jews and Christians better understand their faith, the Bible, and each other. And your support helps us host these vital conversations and create educational resources and interactive learning experiences. And yes, all donations are tax deductible. To give, just visit bridgebuildersforum.com and click donate. Every gift makes a difference, and I want to thank you for standing with us. And if we could serve you in any way, send us a message. Okay, want to pivot a little bit. So pressing pause is not primarily it's not a theological defense or argument for Christians to celebrate Shabbat. Really, this book, the way I would sum it up is it's your story about how Shabbat impacted your family and about how it can impact other families. But you do include a lot of scripture in the book to demonstrate that what you're doing is biblically grounded. So the Bible states, one of the texts that comes up is, the Bible gave the Sabbath specifically to the Jewish people as part of his, God's eternal covenant with we read about that in Exodus 31, which says that Shabbat is this sign between God and the Jewish people. And then there's these other texts which discuss the unique relationship that, you got between God, the Jewish people, Shabbat. However, I thought you guys really articulated this clearly, and David Necrutman, and we're going to talk about David a little bit more in a minute. He does a great job in his book too, of pointing out that there are other texts in the Bible that suggest a universal human need for Shabbat. And one of those texts, not the only one, but one of them, a big one that you highlight, is Isaiah 66, verse 23, which says, "From new moon to new moon and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares the Lord." So I would love just to, hear some of your thoughts as far as what are some of the implications of that text for modern Christians who are feeling a pull towards implementing Shabbat into their lives.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you started with Isaiah 66. Again, that was another part of Sabbath invitation that really stuck out to us. Along with that verse, though, I'd like to include another verse that I think is important, actually, too, that I think is important for people to take a closer look at. And the first is in Exodus 12. And in Exodus 12, it talks about Israel's exodus out of Egypt. But in particular, in verse 38, it talks about not just the Israelites that were leaving Egypt, but it actually says that there was a mixed multitude of people. Mm-hmm. And then a couple chapters later, and this is before Mount Sinai, and I think that's super important because we could definitely spend time too talking about Genesis 2. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's important to look at Exodus 16. And so keeping the context now with not just the Israelites, but a mixed multitude of people, foreigners and the Israelites all together, Moses then says that today, the next or tomorrow, you are going to observe a day of Sabbath. And then he goes on to say that this is a gift. You're being given this from the Lord. And so for us, that's where we talk about, that this has been a gift. Whenever we talk about Sabbath, or if someone hasn't heard about it for the first time, that's really the word I like to use to describe it. And the image I love to give them. It's like I was walking around my life for 40 plus years, carrying this unopened, beautiful gift wrapped box. Now finally in my later 40s, I'm not giving away my age here, you notice, that I had the opportunity to unwrap. So that's the picture and that's the image that I like to pair with Isaiah 66. And what we see happening, and this is just Michael, and this is what Selah, maybe Ryan, you and some of your audience too, the implications, I believe, in God, and I believe this could be God's final act, that he is bringing unity through this, through Sabbath and through Shabbat, and he's bringing reconciliation. And what better way to do that than around a table?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Sitting around a table. And I'll add this just one part about our Sabbath table. In the beginning, when we start our Sabbath dinner, it's very picture worthy. But an hour and a half to 2 hours later, and Selah will laugh at me, but I tell her often, I sit back in my chair. We call it the linger. So in the book, we use the term linger. I love to sit back in my chair and just look at the table. And at this point,
the humanity of
it. It's not Instagram picture worthy.
Sure.
But we had to get to that point to get to the linger. And it's all that stuff in the middle. And so that's what we see. Those are the implications that we see, is that God through Sabbath could be bringing a mixed multitude of people and our differences together, we believe, for such a time as this.
Oh man, I think that is beautifully stated and so powerful. And I think that the Isaiah text, lends support to that, and we see that happening in modern times. I think in a unique way, as far as the diversity and range of people that are I'm just going to say tapping into the beauty and the benefits and the blessing. And that word that you used and emphasized and underscored, gift. It's a gift.
Yes.
And I think that is so important. And that's a very important part of your story that I love that you guys are sort of shouting from the rooftops, because I think that sometimes there's a bad rap when it comes to maybe how some people who have not experienced Shabbat see it. Maybe some will. And I think we've all probably experienced this. And I know people who are listening or watching, maybe have heard this before. Oh, it's all those, it's a bunch of rules, or it's this, or it's that. And it's some kind of a burden. But if you've actually experienced, if you've experienced it, as you guys so beautifully testify, it's not a burden. It's a gift. Yeah. And even for Jewish, Jews who do a very halakhically, legally stringent Sabbath, maybe in an Orthodox expression, they don't see it as a burden. They see it as a gift, because it's in a different way, again, in a diverse way. It's a refuge, and it's a time to connect with God and with each other. And there's different ways that can be done, which I think your book highlights so beautifully. So appreciate the emphasis on it being a gift, because I think that's a powerful term. Yeah. So I want to talk, I know we've already mentioned our friend, David Nikrutman. So for those, again, he's been on here. He's a dear friend of mine and yours. David is an Orthodox Jewish theologian, and he has an organization called the Isaiah Projects. And I know he helped some with your book as well. I mean, actually, that's how I found out about your book. David told me about it, or posted about it or something. And I was like, tell me about this book. I reached out to him. He's like, oh man, you're going to love it. So anyway, Thanks to David for that. I'm sure he'll watch this. So we love you, David. Anyway, I know David has provided, guidance for your family and many other Christians on how to honor Shabbat. And I want to say that I think it's very good that your Sabbath journey includes engagement with knowledgeable, Jews like David and others, considering that, look, as you've already noted, the Jewish people have been celebrating Shabbat for thousands of years. And so it's like, that's important to honor. But I think it's also very important to note that your book and David's book as well on Shabbat, you're not advocating, David's not advocating as an Orthodox Jewish teacher for Christians to observe the Sabbath exactly like Orthodox Jews do. In other words, while Jewish and Christian Sabbath expressions may feature some similar elements, they can also look very different. And so I want to kind of use that to pivot into just some of the practical side of how you guys do Sabbath. So what does it look like in your home? Of course, read the book, everyone, for the full picture, but share a few of the features for us as far as what it looks like for you as Christians to do Shabbat.
Absolutely. Well, and we always joke around about how we didn't start simple, but we have found a beautiful, simple rhythm, and we'd love to share it with you. So Ryan, thanks for noting that. We actually call it like simple steps to Sabbath. You don't need to make this too hard or make this too complicated. And to your point, we've been able to share messages back and forth with David and with others, sharing ideas and holding tradition and holding honor and having creativity in different cultures and contexts and seasons of life. And that's been a lot of fun. In fact, I'll share one of our favorite ones here, but we first talk about signaling Sabbath. And so I do believe you have to find the time for Sabbath. You've got to make the intention of the time. It will not just naturally appear. You have to schedule it just like you would a dentist appointment, just like you would, headed off to a work meeting. Like you have to say, I will show up for this. That's what I mean by that. Mm-hmm. And it's not out of legalism. It's not out of obligation or duty, but it's saying that holds space in my life, because again, in our schedule. And if you're anything like me, like I live by our calendar, work calendar, family calendar. And that's where I put my time and my energy isn't where I say I'm going to be. So put it on the calendar, find a time that works for you. For us, it's Friday evenings. And we talk about like getting into a Sabbath state of mind or signaling Sabbath are different terms we like to use. And so we love going into our Fridays, saying today is Shabbat. It's Shabbat, and our kids are excited. They know that's our rhythm. That's our time that we're going to be at the table. And so, but I will say this, we have very hilarious different ways that we get into a Sabbath state of mind. And Michael, he's so good at the wind down and saying, okay, it's late in the afternoon. I'm going to check my emails. I'm going to send some text messages. I'm going to sit with the Lord and I'm going to read for a little bit in the Word and really, really bring my heart, into a postured place, of connecting with the Lord. Well, and it's on your calendar?
And we will then power
power off his phone.
Oh, nice.
And I'm over here, say we're planning to start at 5:00 just for reference, Ryan. I'm over here at 4:59 sending 3 or 4 emails, stirring spaghetti on the stove, shouting at someone to move the shoes that I'm tripping over on the floor. And then I'm like, okay, we're ready. And I'm shutting everything down as fast as possible. And
you're still in 3 mode. You're in 3 achiever mode, right?
I am. Yeah. I call it pulling the parachute. And now we Shabbat. And we laugh about that because it's our different ways in our own personalities, in our own ways of just acknowledging this is where this time closes and this is where we enter in. And so I just want you to say there's no right way of doing it, but it's the intention of saying, I'm going to draw a line in my week and I'm going to allow this place to be, a time with the Lord, to pull up a chair at the table with Jesus. And then here's a fun practical tip. I'll share there's a lot of ways we could talk and maybe you can walk them through really quickly in a practice. But one thing that we like to do in our home, and we've shared this with David and other friends because it's just our creative adaptability, is we have 4 kids who are all young in age. And so they're all between the ages of 2 and 12. And so we've got a house of young kids and everyone is typically, hungry at that stage. And we're all ready to get to the table. But we have learned if we can take a moment and provide what is needed, in a physical way, then we can allow our hearts and our spirits to relax and really enter in. And so the way we do that is every Friday we create like a fun charcuterie board, and I'm grabbing whatever nuts and olives and fruit and cheese and crackers I have on hand. It's not typically fancy, but it is a lot of fun to put together. I let the kids be a part of it if they want to be a part of it. Everyone knows that is a way that we can all sit and we can munch, and Michael can take the time and have devotional and lead us in blessing. And we can take a moment and put on a worship song and honor the Lord and really enter into that sacred place of Shabbat time, before dinner. And so it's always fun seeing what creations we put together, what patterns we put together, what food we have in the pantry or in the fridge. And I feel like that's been a way that our family, who, whether it's the kids or us, are a little munchy, you know what I mean? But we can take a moment and kind of almost like put together a painter's palette, so to say, of just some of the creation of the Lord. And like I said, nourish our body and allow our spirits to move slowly and steadily into a place of Sabbath.
Yeah. Talk to us about the table. What takes place at the table?
Going back to Genesis 2, God he called the seventh day a day that wasn't good or very good, but he called it holy. And so an encouragement to those that are watching or listening, and we have a chapter that's titled Make It Yours. Mm-hmm. But that can be our couple encouragements. Yeah. Make it yours, but set it apart. How is it set it apart? And with a heart posture and I think that this is a differentiator in pressing pause, Ryan, is that our Shabbat, our Sabbath, it's not about Michael time and Selah time. What can I get out of it? Mm-hmm. I think what sets it apart, though, is saying, okay, God, this is now your time. This is God time. And have your way in these next few minutes or these next few hours or 24 hours, however short or long that your Sabbath practice happens to be. But after we sit at the table together, we'll all greet each other and we'll say Shabbat Shalom. And then from there, with our charcuterie board, I'll share, the Bible talks about, in Exodus, remember the Sabbath. And so I'll pick a verse or two, or if I saw something, read something, or if there's a way to illustrate it creatively, just the why that we're sitting around our table. And then we light the candles. Yeah. And that's the next way that something about just lighting the candle and the atmosphere.
The atmosphere changes.
Yeah, it's tangible. Yeah, it's a very tangible, visible thing. You say, okay, now something's, changed. And I think that's great.
It really is. We have a playlist called Pressing Pause. We picked on each other earlier that neither of us are singers, but we will pick a song, and sometimes we rotate around the family. What's been a song that's been speaking to you that gives an opportunity for others around the table to be contributors? So it's just not driven by dad or it's driven by mom, but we want to get our kids, we want to get our guests involved in any way that they feel comfortable, of course, doing. And then from there, we'll have communion. And then I'll say one of my favorite parts, it's all my favorite, but we call it the blessing radar. And so I have a journal that I keep with me that I write down. If I know on the upcoming Friday outside of my family, I write down names of who's going to be sitting around our table. Okay. And what I'm doing, my blessing radar, is I'm looking to write down the good that I see in my wife, in my Proverbs 31. I look for the good that I'm seeing in my 2-year-old, and my 9-year-old, my 11-year-old, and my 12-year-old. And then Ryan, I get the opportunity where then I stand up, and then, as I mentioned earlier, then I walk over to each of them and I speak what I saw that was good in a world that we live in today, that is doing everything but calling out the God in Christ, in his sons and his daughters. I get the opportunity to call out their identity and remind them about who God made them to be. And we've had Fridays, not every Friday, where after I say the last blessing, we like to say the priestly blessing together as a family, that I'll sit down, and several Fridays then, Ryan, I've felt a hand on my shoulder. And it was one of our kids that walks over to dad and then speaks a blessing over me. And so, as I mentioned earlier, and I could get really excited about this, but our Friday nights, it's not Hirsch time. It's God time. And it's seeing his purpose activated in us. Yeah. So then we could advance, because, God loves rest, but he also created work, and he loves work as well too. And so that hand for me is just a reminder of the ultimate purpose, which is to shine like lights, and it's to be the brightest light that we can be, that God has called us.
So just in a recap, it's not a perfect formula. There's not a clock running, but I would say for anyone who's trying to go, okay, let me wrap this into my brain here. It's like maybe 15, 20 minutes, is what we're doing. And then just before then we enter and enjoy our meal. And I'll tell you the way we come to the table, I'm going to recap them quickly, and we welcome each other. We take a moment and have a devotional time and really kind of turn our focus to the Lord. We light the candles and we listen to worship music, which changes the atmosphere. And then we break and share communion, and Michael blesses us. I'll tell you, that right there alone is our truly most favorite part of the week.
The bless. Yeah. You talking about the blessing part, or just in general?
The blessing is personally one of my favorite moments, because it is it's a way to receive words of affirmation in a world that is full of broken messages and the battle of self-doubt and the battle of, that goes on in people's minds. It's a way to rewire it. But I'll tell you, that right there is, I feel like, where the Father's, the Father God comes through the father or whoever is the leader in the home, and to bless the children. And it end caps that perfect, again, 15 or 20 minutes or so, that becomes the deepest deposit, I would say, in our week context. And so that's what I'm saying. It's for anybody. You can do it in any season of life, whether you're an empty nester, you're a single, college student gathering your friends, you've got young kids like us, you're in a season where you're traveling and maybe able to share a moment with colleagues. It can be, at a restaurant. Like, I do believe it's a gift that we're meant to carry everywhere. And also it carries into every season of life.
Yeah, it's the aspect of that you're emphasizing here of blessing, giving blessings to each other, and how that's woven into the fabric of Shabbat is just, it's so powerful. And I would agree. It's one of, for me, on Friday nights, just the opportunity, and my kids, I have kids that are a broad range of ages for my kids too, but the older ones, they love when I, give them a blessing, and of course my wife loves it too. And so, but just again, having that consistent weekly opportunity, and you use the word affirmation is so incredibly important. And so I appreciate the emphasis on the blessing that takes place during that time, because it really is powerful for bringing just unity to our families. Because again, we're something that's coming up repeatedly here. It's connecting with God, but it's connecting with each other as well.
Yeah. And I know we're about to wind down, but if you don't mind, I'll share that last thought maybe there is we are getting testimonies from so many people in all different seasons of life where the practice and just the steps it's bringing calm to anxious hearts. We got a message last week from a couple who's been married. They're well into their more mature years, but this has strengthened their marriage right now in a way that they hadn't experienced in decades. It's bringing them back together. We're seeing parents who have been praying for prodigals being, to come home, being able to come and say, hey, come to the table. We're seeing younger generations of kids. And so I feel like from the physical, the emotional, the family seasons, like the conversations are, hey, I just started, or hey, this was exactly, which is what I needed, or I've been dealing with heartache or financial stress, and I just needed a moment to release it to the Lord, or this has given us a chance to linger and laugh as a family that maybe we haven't done in so long, And so I just believe that in all these stories and testimonies and different scenarios of life, we're seeing the gift applied to each and every one. So if you're listening today, this is for you.
Yeah, definitely. So I do want to ask you one more question before we bring this to a close. And I want to encourage folks to get the book. You can find it on Amazon, Pressing Pause. But, I'd love for you guys just to sum up, why you're so passionate about sharing this story. Of course, it's awesome that this has done a great thing. Obviously this has helped your family tremendously, but you didn't just write a book. You've got a website, you speak speak. You guys love speaking opportunities. So if there's anybody out there that's got groups that maybe want Michael and Selah to come speak, reach out, and their info I'll include a link to their website. But bottom line, you've clearly made yourselves available to help others to start Sabbath. So how would you sum up, like, why are you guys so passionate about pressing pause and sharing that with others?
Why are we so passionate? Well, I love the saying that you are often positioned to help the person you once were, and I look back with a heart of gratitude for the divine breadcrumbs, for the people that the Lord placed in our path, for the unexpected invitation to Israel, as much as it was for other families that we mentioned in our story to say, hey, come and sit at our table. Because with that, I truly believe we would be, if we had not received that gift, if we weren't bringing it actively and intentionally into our lives, I believe Michael and I would have experienced a lifestyle of highs and lows, and not so much in life, because they will still come and they will still go. Sabbath does not make you immune to that.
Sure.
But it would have been seasons of burnout and exhaustion. I think we would have gone through roller coasters of marital stress in ways that we would not have known how to navigate. I think we would have only tried to continue to hold in places of striving instead of learning places of surrender. And so I say we're kind of at first base in a lot of ways. I think of still unpacking this gift, but because we've seen the fruit in our family, to see our children look at each other and kind of go, this is what peace is meant to feel like.
Yeah.
For our one child who's walking through a bit of a medical issue, to say, Mom and Dad, I feel like Jesus is healing power inside of me tonight. For Michael and I to walk out of Sabbath and come out with fresh ideas, creativity and innovation and inspiration, to step into our week. Like, these are the things that I feel like I only want more people to have more of, and again, I think I think we all understand that the world is shouting at us to go more, to go faster, to go fast, to only do. And I just wish, I wish that there are more who would understand that the Father is saying, come to me and to be with me in his presence. And again, we had already been walking with the Lord. There's just this richness. It's hard to put on words. And I work with words.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
There's a richness of the Father's love that I have just begun to taste and experience that I want for you, for whoever is listening today. What would you say?
It's hard to top that.
Yeah, it was good.
We just recently moved to Florida, Ryan, that you know that. And when we were driving here, following each other in our vehicles, we were getting ready to drive across a bridge into Pensacola. And there's this cheeky sign on the side of the road that said, to fuel up, the bridge is long. It's a 3-mile bridge. It's not even the longest bridge in Florida. But, we've said that, Sabbath, and it was the gift that we received that we didn't even know that we needed. And I would just advocate and say that I believe that there are those that are watching and listening right now that are in that same season of life. You're working hard, your kingdom and your mission focused. Yeah. We just want to make sure that you fuel up. Because the journey is long. It's a wonderful journey. It's a glorious journey, but it's a long journey. And we all want to hear those words like good and faithful servant. And that's my heart for those that get the opportunity to be able to receive this gift if they choose.
I love it. Yeah. And I want to just highlight and underscore something that you said, Selah, just a moment ago, in that I can relate so much to oftentimes coming out of Shabbat with a sense of creativity, because it's really powerful. And I think everybody can relate to that just sometimes when we're just kind of like doing nothing, that's why you think about, sometimes we get our best ideas when we're like, taking a shower, or we're in the bath, or we're taking the walk, or we're at the gym, when we just kind of pause, when we press pause. It's like that's when our brains and our bodies, and even just like our spirit in some sense, can just sort of, things can just flow naturally. And when you have a whole day to do that, or whatever you're able to, to set aside, there's tremendous power in that. And oftentimes, you come out of it with just some really rich stuff. So you said that quickly in passing, but it's very, very significant. And so I think sometimes even for us to be the best we can be, we think we have to do more. We think we have to stay on but sometimes the best thing to move further faster is to just press pause and let things flow. So Shabbat.
It's so true. And isn't that so countercultural? Like sometimes
it is.
The thing you can do is pause. I mean, everything in me is like, just do 5 more things, but it's true. And I love that you said that. I think we'll just underscore that moment. It's one thing to find rest and peace at the table. Yeah. But then from that, we have found that delight begins to emerge. And we talk about the Sabbath soul cycle. And so it's one thing just to pause. It's another thing to see the tangible feeling of peace that comes from that place and the gratitude that comes from that. And that's where we find delight. And you're right. You kind of go from managing life and managing kids and now feeling like, I really love spending time with you. I love laughing with you, but that you brought it all the way around. And there is an activation of greater purpose in your personality, in your work, in your place in the kingdom, in your body of Christ. Yours looks different from mine, but I'll tell you, I truly believe that the Lord says, come to me, fill up the gas tank, renew yourself in me, and go back out and be exactly who I've called you to be so that you can shine like a bright light. It's not meant to be, forever and ever burnt at both ends of the candle, but it's meant to be brought out of a place of his presence. And I truly believe that people will know us by the light we carry. And for us, we find that light at the table. Yep. So well said. Well, Michael and Selah, this has been a great discussion, and it's so relevant and practical. Many people can just identify with the problems that you discuss in your book: anxiety, busyness, noise, the rat race, so on. And I think a lot of people are going to be inspired by that, really the solution that Shabbat offers. We really do we all need to press pause. And as you say, find rest in a restless world. And I am confident that your book is going to help people, especially people to where maybe this is like, it's a foreign concept, or they just want to take that first step. And I want to really emphasize that you guys are very good with just kind of helping people to take the first step. And so I appreciate your heart, your desire to share your story and help others discover the beauty and refuge that Shabbat offers. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for having us. This has been a total honor. What's the best way to if folks have further questions, again, you guys have made yourself available, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys and the ways to get the book too? Absolutely. Well, more available than one might think. Yes, absolutely. We want you to get in touch with us. So go on Amazon, grab the book, just pressing pause right there. It's a one-click order. If you're a Prime member like us, it'll be right on your doorstep. But engage with us at a greater level. Go to startsabbath.com. We've got our contact information on there. You can get a hold of us. We put together what's called the Pressing Pause Challenge, because sometimes you need to be encouraged and reminded and say, how do I walk this thing out? And so that's just a free challenge on there that we put together that are some of the steps we've unpacked mostly in a lot of the conversation with you today that'll show up in your inbox. It'll give you reminders and tips and resources and ways that have equipped us in our journey. And my phone number is purposefully in the back. So it's my cell phone number is in the back of this book. That's bold. That's bold. Okay. And one of our favorite things, and it's not page 175 in the book. And it's not to be made public on social media, but it encourages us for you to send a message to us, send over a picture of your table, your Shabbat, whatever that looks like for however you're making it. Yours. And then we pray over every single Sabbath and we take turns in who prays, but we pray over every single reader of a book or listening of a podcast like this. So we'd love to stay in touch. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you guys. And I'll put links in the show notes as well. But hey, again, thank you guys for being with us, your heart, your book. And I'll wish you a couple days early. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Bye. Thanks, guys. Hey, I would love to connect with you further, so feel free to leave a comment or send me a private message. And the best way for us to stay in touch is to sign up for the Bridge Builders Forum email at bridgebuildersforum.com. This will keep you informed of cutting-edge resources and opportunities for us to connect and learn together. Additionally,
The Bridge Builders Forum is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and your support helps us create content that overcomes misunderstandings and advances ideas that build bridges between Jews and Christians. So we'll be back soon to discuss more ideas that help Jews and Christians better understand their faith, the Bible, and each other.